The years leading up to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, almost a year old now, many European governments prioritized what they called the climate objectives. I'm not sure that their policies actually improve their environment, but that was their surmise, climate objectives over energy abundance. And in particular, they prioritized cheap energy from an authoritarian regime over energy independence. Do you think that that playbook executed by governments in Europe is something we ought to be doing in the United States?
I think that the clear lesson is that no country should be beholden to one supplier for its energy sources or a very large proportion of its energy sources, and that energy security is built on energy diversification. I think that energy diversification is at the backbone of U.S. energy policy, and so I don't see any risk that the United States will follow suit in that respect.
Well, you say energy security is built on energy diversification. I would have thought energy security would be based on energy independence. Am I wrong about that?
I think it's independence, but I also think that it's not just one source of energy, because things can go wrong. No one should put all of their chips right on sort of one marker when it comes to energy security. So I think that to have as diverse a supply as possible, while still looking at other goals, like climate goals, is a very good path forward for countries to take, and it's something that the United States wants to support other countries in helping to do.
Well, why wouldn't we put our chips on American energy? And we've got various sources of energy in this country. Why wouldn't we put our chips there?
I think we are putting our chips on.
No, we're not. We're producing less oil and gas in this country than we were previously. The president, when he came to office, his first day in office, he imposed a moratorium on oil and gas leases on federal land. Since then, he has leased the fewest acres of federal land for oil and natural gas since the Truman administration. Why are we shutting down American oil and natural gas production, taking away American jobs, and making ourselves more dependent on foreign sources of energy? I don't understand this policy.
Well, the U.S. will produce a record amount of both crude oil and natural gas in 2023, even higher than the spikes pre-COVID levels. And the president is actively encouraging U.S. oil producers to increase production and reinvest their profits back into production rather than buying back stocks, and I think that's the right policy to pursue.
He's doing that while he is shutting down the ability to lease federal land for oil and natural gas, the fewest acres of federal land leased since the Truman administration. He's boasted about how he hopes, that he just said in the State of the Union, that we may not need American oil after another 10 years. I mean, what kind of a message does that send? Is that energy security?
So any questions about leasing on federal land, I would direct to the Department of Interior, not the Department of Energy, sir.
Oh, listen, don't play that game with me. We're talking here about energy production. Oil and natural gas are energy production. And the facts of the matter are this president has reduced our ability to be energy independent. And you're sitting here telling me that that increases our energy security. It looks just the opposite to me. It seems to me that you're recommending the European playbook, which left them dependent on foreign nations, left them dependent ultimately on hostile actors, and that's what you're trying to replicate here again in the United States. I just don't understand why this course of action is being recommended, why your administration's pursuing it. I also don't understand why you would shut down pipelines that cancel thousands of good-paying American energy jobs. I mean, why is that a healthy energy policy for this country?
With all due respect, sir, I really don't see much of a comparison between where Europe was before the outbreak of the war and their energy mix and where they were getting energy from and where the United States is today.
Well, let me just ask you, on the topic of dependence on authoritarian regimes, about China. China is one of the largest processors of the materials that serve as the building blocks for many of the so-called green energy transition that the administration is pursuing. According to the IEA, China processes 40% of the world's copper, more than 30% of the nickel in the world, 60% of cobalt, 60% of lithium, and more than 80% of rare earth minerals. Now, in light of that, many commentators have suggested that the United States is even more dependent on China for key components of solar power, panels, wind turbines, and batteries than Europe was on Russia in the lead up to the invasion of Ukraine. So I say again, in light of all of that, don't you think that this administration's climate agenda is making us more dependent on China while we lessen our reliance on our own domestic energy sources?
Well, sir, as I said in my testimony before, I think you're absolutely right. China does own too much of the critical minerals supply chain from from ownership of resources through processing and through the creation of modules and other sort of parts of clean energy components.
So why would you want to make us more dependent on them?
Use the tools that the Congress has given us, sir, to make sure that we diversify the supply chains, reshore as many of them, and create sound relationships with non-Chinese suppliers. That is absolutely a top priority of this administration.
For heaven's sake, here's what you've done. You came to office. You took us from being an energy independent nation to being an energy dependent nation. You have made us more dependent. Now this administration's gone begging to OPEC and dictators all around the world. You have made us less energy secure. Now you're making us energy dependent on China. You're canceling good paying American jobs. It's a disaster, and all the while increasing the cost of energy across this nation. It is an absolute disaster, and I can't imagine why, in light of what happened in Ukraine, we would want to replicate those disastrous policies here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.